Hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with probably one of the most interesting people I have ever met in my life. Konrad was somebody we got a chance to meet with at a AIMA delegation. Learned so much from him about resilience, about brand building, about how you disrupt industry after industry. So it's going to be a real privilege and a pleasure talking to you, Konrad. Vinita is here as well. Vinita, I know you have closing comments to make, but please feel free to dive in with questions because you also did get the chance to meet Konrad earlier. Konrad, I mean, you're known right now as the person who's, your exports are sometimes called the Tesla of the sea. I'm sure you get offended by that and saying the Teslas are the exports of the road, right?
Yeah, and sometimes they say like, you're like Elon Musk, and I always say like, no, I'm Konrad.
Yes. I've heard the comparison with Elon Musk, I've heard the comparison with Richard Branson. I'm not sure which one you prefer.
Of course, it's honoring to be mentioned by so big and great people, but at the same time, I really try to do my own thing and invent things that is not there and make purpose, both from a sustainability point of view, but also from a technology, design, and branding. You know, it's important that you feel very proud over your product and feel good about what you're buying these days.
So for the people who've been following Konrad very closely, of course, right now, the X boats that he's doing, which are electric boats, absolutely spectacular. They're a pleasure to ride and a privilege to ride in one of those. Soda, which is the, it's a Swiss company which makes skincare products. But before that, Marshall, I mean, still Marshall, of course, is something that you work very closely with. So a number of products, you've been involved with all of them. But I think people would learn a lot from just hearing your life story, from where it started off in Sweden, living close to the sea and your affinity for the sea. I'm just going to get you to take people through that life story because I think the lessons are in that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it started with my mom and dad who always believed in everything that I did. Even if some things turned up a little wrong, they said like, jump up on the horse again, you can do it. And I think growing up with such an attitude that nothing was impossible and your two closest companions in life who put you to life basically are pushing you in a quite dreamy kind of word is amazing because, yeah, everything, to run companies or be an innovator or build new global companies, I guess you have to failure quick and then go up and make the success and always keep changing until you find the magic. Experience makes magic. So just these two, were behind me from the start. So I started as more or less a fisherman. When I was like 6, 7, I took up fish. My grandma is from a fisherman's family, and I sold it at the camping just a couple of kilometers away, but that's how I started to make my own money. Then I had like a small beach cafe where people walked by, and I always like dragged them in, and I said, I have something special for you, my friend, and sold them something. One of them were a dentist, and basically I was selling more candy and sugars and sodas and stuff like that. So he said, I'm a dentist, so I can't buy anything here. And then the next day I had picked some flowers that I could sell to him.
And then that took you to surfing, right? And your passion for surfing, which then led to a business there somewhere.
I always been very close to the sea, so when I was 16, I became a professional windsurfer and had the chance to move to New Zealand to explore my wings of windsurfing. It didn't become the best windsurfer, but I think I became more of a salesman. So I started up Thule roof racks, which is a Swedish brand. It's the world's biggest brand in roof racks and the car, basically for transportation. Then I started up that in Australia together with my father, and started to work I became more into fashion and started brands like Quicksilver, Volcom, and these brands.
That's where you really rode the first wave. So to use a surfing analogy, you can ride a wave, and sometimes you can ride the wave too long, and then it crashes and you sort of go under. And that did happen to you, right? From a position of considerable success, you found yourself sleeping in your car.
Yeah, I was in love with my company, and I put basically, everything onto it. And my company was growing like 50 to 100% per year, but I didn't have the margin enough to grow that quick. I lost everything and woke up one day with quite a big debt, especially if you're like, I was 27, and I had a debt of 500,000 euros. But if you don't have a job, it's quite a lot.
When you're 27, 500,000 in debt could feel like 500 million in debt.
It could. I mean, it was like, okay, how am I ever going to get through this? Is this going to take all my life, or what's the plan to work this through?
Parents sometimes are constantly telling you, be careful, be careful. And you said your parents didn't encourage you to take risks.
Yeah.
Were there times when you were sleeping in that car that you said, I wish I had been more careful?
Of course, that at least that was my thoughts, but just to show the reality at my home is like, I had my first child. She was like 1 year, and I needed to support her, but I didn't have that much money, and I was a little down when I talked to my mother about that, and her response was, but Konrad, you don't have any studio debt. So she thought like, what are you crying about? Like, this is going to be fun.
I think people can learn a lot around resilience from you. So I'm going to try and take a life lesson from that moment. You've been successful, and suddenly you're deep in debt and you can't figure out what to do. How did you turn it around, and what are the lessons from that you think everyone here at AIMA can learn?
Well, in Sweden we have something something called lagom, and when you're starting a company, it's like jumping off the roof. You just hope that you don't break too many legs and can keep on running, because once you throw the dice, it is 24/7, and nothing goes usually as it should, like it was planned. I always plan my businesses very strong, and I always keep track of it, but it never really works out as the Excel sheet, and that is the plan. But if you are quick and a little smart and have experience, the game is that you need to change. You maybe don't need to go from boats to making cars, but the boats in itself we changed so many times, and it was the same with the headphones that we sold 20 million products in 8 years in 130 different countries with Urban Ears and Marshall. It's, I think part of the game is that you are in control and you need to lyssna lagom, which means that you should always listen to critics and be open-minded to see what you can do better, because it's always an evolution. But at the same time, you probably thought more about this than anybody else. So some recommendations and some advice is not relevant because they don't see the full picture. So we call it in Sweden, lyssna lagom.
So how did you go from $500,000 in debt and sleeping in a car to where you then eventually ended up? What was the next step? How did you actually take the next step, and what was it?
I think one big part was never giving up. I remember this, that when I was, like 33 or something, my daughter was like 6, 7. She made this picture with that.
But the specifics of it, what were the next steps that you did then?
After that, I started a company at the time called Sound Industries that moved into becoming Marshall Group, and we made headphones fashionable and electronics fashionable. So it was like taking a product that was everywhere, but take it into a different kind of segment where people who bought them would listen with their eyes. So when I'm making brands and making designs, I always try to look from our 5 senses, and like, how does the brand smell? How does the brand sound? How is the character of the design, that you can always recognize it without reading what brand it is, and how does it feel? CMF, color, material, finishes is super important to the product, and also the experience when you take on them to see what it is. So I actually have some slides. Maybe I should show something. Is the slideshow on? No. Oh, over there. Or, okay, it's a little slow. That's me. Not working. Oh, anyway, maybe we could share that in a different area, but. Yeah, with the design, it can be so much more than just a product. I would say it could be, you want the people to. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that is in the EU commissions when I'm talking about X-Shore and saving the oceans. You can go to the next. Yeah, surfing and snowboarding is my background. Maybe a little bit quicker. I'm searching for a.
You can just go there.
Yeah, thank you. So this one. So this is where you have in the middle, and you're kind of starting to work with it all around with all your different senses. And I think many brands don't think like that. They copy, and they don't find their own identity. They do. So those brands are usually better with logistics, production, and so on. But if you want to build a global brand, I think that it needs to how do you attach with the consumer in a different way.
And just to touch on the theme that you're talking about here, if you're able to do this successfully, you get a disproportionate share of the value. I mean, this, for example, is what Steve Jobs would always say about Apple. If you are able to give that sense from the time you're unpacking the phone to when you're finally using it, you'll be able to capture the audience and get a lot of value.
Yeah, but I also think that is the story in itself about the brand. What's the purpose, or what's the higher purpose? Why are we doing this? Because we should remember, before internet, how did stories get through? They got through because they were interesting and they were getting people attached. And I think that is the oldest way how to build brands, which for me is different stories, is that you need to educate the story and then let it roll. So if you can build it through the product, you know, and stories can be in very, very many different ways. You know, like myself, I went from Mr. Loud with Marshall and Urban Ears, and now I'm trying to make something very, very silent and beautiful, and it's a totally different kind of story, but there are still stories.
I'm going to come back to the theme of brands and brand building in a couple of minutes. But talk to us a little bit about Marshall, because here's a brand that is very much about, you know, rock stars on a big hall, and you can stay there, Konrad, if you like, and, you know, make sure that they are
maybe I'll start a little bit with Urban Ears, because Urban Ears was actually the company who built so we could do Marshall. But my idea was to build a fashion house with headphones. Technology in general was very poor from an exciting kind of perspective. It was quite boring. Everybody did the same. They had it in silver, some of them had it in black, and then Apple came and they did it in white. My idea was to color them and you know, follow fashion, and making sure that we were doing them in the right colors so we could be on the front page of a Vogue or all these kind of fashion magazines all around the world. I knew that we couldn't win the audio war, you know, the best audio directly. Because a company like Bang & Olufsen or Sony or Pioneer maybe has been doing this for 70 years, so how could we come from nowhere and be in their magnitude directly? But I knew that we could do it through design, and then I also put on a microphone, because this was at the exactly same time that Apple came out with the iPhone, and the phone became smart. And what happened then was that everybody was going to have all the music in the pocket, and they could consume any media. But to have a good experience, if you're in a public area, usually you need headphones or speakers or something to connect with. So that was kind of the take on the company. And we did this monochrome headphones that was beautifully designed at a quite mid-price, and that worked so well. And maybe you can change slide to Marshall. Yeah. And then my father always talked about Jimi Hendrix, the great Jimi Hendrix, the guitar player that was on a theme park in Stockholm, Gröna Lund, in 1967. And he was an engineer. So when he talked about Jimmy, he talked about as much about Marshall, because Marshall founded the distortion sound that you can recognize as rock and roll sound, you know, the screaming guitars. And it was because they put in a 100-watt amplifier instead of a 10-watt. So they broke the speaker and made it distorted. And when Jimmy got that in his hands, he thought that, wow, this just sounds so cool. And some people said, like, no, it's broken. No, this is a new invention. And I traveled there in 2009 because I always liked guitar music a lot. And basically, I went into their warehouse, looked at all the products, went back to the board meeting room and made them a concept that I want to do a headphone that is squared, just like your amps. I want to use this material of fake snake skin and together with brass and some white details and keeping the logo big. And they said, like, wow, you know, we had a couple of 100 people here who tried to take our brand and do it to something else, but no, we felt that no one understood what they were doing, but it seems like maybe you know our brand better than ourselves. And from there, I started to, if you take the next picture, next. Yeah, I started with the headphones, and then next, and then doing different speakers that looked very, very retro. I didn't want to change the design in the beginning. We just how we just took it from the amp and basically made a very good speaker. And from there, sound industries grow so much that we became 30 times bigger than Marshall. And in 2023, I architected the deal for merge and the buyout. It was combined. The family got the big check, but they also got the big partnership of the old company by giving them shares.
You're a little, these sort of boxes have of course become even more popular because of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you can stream music as opposed to having to plug it.
We were streaming it from the beginning. That was the whole thing. And what's different to maybe other speakers that was an invention, just like with the microphone, is that when I wanted to, I listen to different music, and sometimes I want to change the treble and the bass compared to what music I listen to. So I put treble and bass directly. So instead of using your brain going 8 UXs away in the phone, I could do it directly. And I could listen to the music instead of being in a technical figuration and change it directly. And that gave a better music experience.
Just wanted to shift to the next industry then that you started to disrupt or tried to disrupt is X-boats, right? Which are electric boats. You may have a screen. Well, okay, let's just go over a couple of these slides.
This is where we made the world's best music phone that had everything that a phone needs, but it had double microphones that was studio graded. We had a music card inside that you could do a higher definition, and you could, for example, DJ directly. So it's a handheld studio basically. So next. Yeah, this is, if we put all the packaging together, it would be like 267 of the Burj Khalifa. It's a lot of products. 20 million products is a lot of products. Yeah, it was my first unicorn. Next one. You can go to the next. Next. Sorry for this. Next. Yeah. Push one. So this is the boats. I mean, we basically won not all design prizes all over the world, but we won a lot. Thank you. To make a boat look special, it's not that easy. You know, boats been around for thousands. But in the end, I took a fishing boat in the front and a modern sailing boat in the rear, and I put them together, and it gave that unique silhouette that you could see it from a kilometer away, and you still know that that's an X-shore.
So one of the things that is really interesting about riding in one of those boats, because I did it, so did Vinita. I'm going to get her in on that. I think it changes the experience so much because when you're out on the water, it's supposed to be peaceful. It's supposed to be serene. It's supposed to be quiet. And when you have an outboard motor and the smell of diesel, it destroys it all. When you're riding in one of those, you really get to appreciate being on the water, perhaps the best way.
Yeah, for me, like I explained, you know, my history is very close to the ocean. I always feel good when I'm on the ocean or close to it. It gives me something, you know, that I feel like home. And I couldn't believe that being on the water, from being sometimes a sailor, that it should be sounding so much, that you should have the fumes. And also when I was diving for oysters, I thought that I was going to be run over, but the boat that I heard was so far away. But the density of the water makes sound travel so much longer. So you can imagine the fishes or the animals that is living in the sea, when you have boats that is so loud, you know, it's not very nice. So I needed to make this invention, and my father helped me a lot with this project.
Vinita, perfect time to perhaps get you in. If you have a comment or question on anything that you've heard.
Yeah. Hi, Konrad. It has...
One more? Yeah. One. Perfect.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure to hear your conversation, and I must say I've been privileged to have been on that boat in April on our delegation when we went to your house for dinner, and it was an absolutely amazing experience. Not only is it a very good-looking boat, but it was silent, and it was probably one of my most comfortable boat rides that I've ever had. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's been, and are you the first person to have even conceptualized an electric boat, or was it there when you...
So, like you learn in school, water and electronics shouldn't be mixed, right? It's kind of the first thing you learn. So there were people trying this in the 1800s, especially in England, and there were some pretty bad accidents with the electricity and water. But today there is technologies and certifications that you can use, so it is safe. So I didn't... like many of my inventions or brands and so on, I say that I don't have to invent the wheel, but I should always question it. And I think that is something that, you know, when me and my father were sitting down and we couldn't understand why boats were so dirty and polluting the ocean that we love the most, we came to the conclusion that electric is going to be the way forward, but the bottleneck is how to store the energy with the different battery technologies. And once Tesla came in 2012, you know, I trademarked X-Shore in 1996, so it's an old idea that I had to sit on because the technology wasn't there. But in 2012, when the Tesla S came, I thought, and my father as well, that now the technology is there, it's commercial, and it's not too expensive. But then I was too busy selling the headphones and speakers all over the world that it took me until 2018 to have my first prototype.
It's fascinating.
The cost part is important, right? Because people, you know, you'll talk a lot about sustainability and why you need to buy green products and the rest of it. But the real inflection point comes when it is affordable. We've seen this with electric vehicles. We're seeing this with solar. We're seeing this with other forms of sustainability. When the price comes below a point is when adoption really goes up.
Yes, and boats are expensive, and especially to drive them. You know, it's like 5 times... again, because the water takes so much energy, it's like 5 times compared to a car to drive it. But with our boat, we are like 20 times less, depending on the price of the energy. But instead of a boat ride costing $200, for us it costs $10.
A somewhat related question from Shrutisha, who says, design has been centric in your ventures. My question is, in today's climate of AI rapid change, how do you see green tech startups balancing profitability with long-term sustainability?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I think, you know, after the pandemic, something changed from the investors, that they had been quite trigger happy to support companies who had the vision to just become the world's biggest within a segment. And you could lose money 10, 12, 15, up to even 20 years. And then the pandemic came, and for some reason that also affected startups. And that was to see profitability much earlier. So I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, because right now everybody is looking for companies that is doing growth and are profitable. and I did that with the sound industry, so Marshall Group. We were always profitable. We are Sweden's quickest growing company in history, and it was, of course, all the learnings from my bankruptcy. But with Xshore, it's a bigger thing that you can't be profitable in such segment when you're building factories for $100 million, and it's just, or I haven't figured out how we could be profitable tomorrow, but we will be profitable in 3 to 4 years.
So that profitability is a little further away. Prerna is another question. I mean, you can keep sending, the audience can keep sending questions up. Prerna, I think, has got the current flood situation in India in mind. I don't know if you can think of any forms of resources or technology that could help with that.
I didn't hear the first...
I mean, there are floods happening. I mean, India's
Yeah.
got this constant problem of floods followed
Yeah.
by droughts. So,
isn't that more in the infrastructure than building a boat, maybe?
rainwater harvesting and other
Yeah.
things are probably one of the solutions.
But I'm sure that there is a lot of smart things to do there with harvesting at the same time when there is coming floods and so on. But I guess you need bigger rivers, maybe.
Just wanted to, before I come back to that branding question, which I want to spend some more time on, the overall economic situation, like obviously all of us are deluged by headlines every day, tariff wars, trade wars, everything changing dramatically, and you know it seems to be continuing to accelerate. How are you viewing the situation, and you know, as Swedish companies looking at countries like India, looking at possible expansion out here? How are you visualizing all of this?
Well, first of all, we are living in a world that is, at the moment, quite crazy. It feels like it's okay to start war. It feels like it's okay to say whatever you think in many ways, and dishonor people in many ways. It seems like the dictators of the world is taking advantage that somebody did something wrong and now I can do it at the same time. But I never, in my life, I never experienced to live in a world where there's chaos all over the world. Usually it can be chaos in Europe or in Asia or in America. And me as a global entrepreneur has been then chasing the business in a way, in a place where it's quite calm. But right now we are living in a very unpredicted future because our politicians, that has been named by us in most of the countries, are working a different way than I think humanity have done for the past 70 to 100 years.
Do you, when you talk to other, colleagues and entrepreneurs and other people in business in Sweden and elsewhere in Europe, is there increasing interest in India? I mean, I know the free trade agreement talks are on. Your Sweden's neighbor, Norway's, that free trade agreement has been done. It goes into effect on the 1st of October. Is there increasing interest, you think, in India or not yet?
I believe in India so much. I believe that you have a good infrastructure and can really grow on it. And I believe that, in the next future, India really has the chance to become the world's biggest economy. But if you look at the global level, there is a new future where I think that we will have to live with some craziness. I don't think that we have seen the end, and that people want to be nice. I feel that people want to be shitheads, to be remembered for things that you usually don't want to be remembered for.
I think you're right. But before I hand over to Vinita, one last question. The question of branding of what you were talking about when it comes to products. A lot of people believe that in this chaotic world that we are in, personal branding also becomes very important. How are you, communicating? How are you building your social media profile? How are you positioning your own personal brand in the job industry? Would you agree with that? And what would you tell people out here who are hearing this as advice more and more?
Yeah, I agree with it. I'm not saying that I like it, but with when I was doing sound or Marshall Group, I think I only did 4 interviews in 10 years. I really wanted to be the underdog and not showing who I was, and if I could concentrate more on the task, I thought that was better than getting the PR. With Xshore, that is when Instagram and Facebook started to realize that if they had the traffic, they could sell it. And it was impossible or very hard or stupid to spend the money on your company advertising instead of your development of new product. But I found out that if I, as a person, were doing this promotion, crossing with the company, it was more than half price. So that's where I started to put my story out and talk about the different things that I've been doing.
Thank you.